Welcome to the first day of the American Gem Trade Association's Dynamic Seminar Series. Our next speaker, Richa Goyal Sikri, is a journalist, gemologist, and storyteller based in Singapore. Since 2018, Richa has delivered a diverse body of work ranging from bespoke gems journeys, articles in prestigious publications, presentations, to storytelling campaigns delivered to a highly engaged community of over 106,000 on her Instagram account. And we'll need to talk about that. You need to give me some hints. In 2020, Gemfields commissioned Richa to write a book, No Stone Unturned, The Hunt for African Gems. Published in 2024, after 4 years of in-depth interviews and research, Richa brings a life of 24 adventure stories based on actual events related to African gems. Richa has written and continues to work for several prestigious magazines, publications such as Harper's Bazaar, Vogue Singapore, Rappaport Magazine, India Today, and for the Natural Diamond Council. Please join me in welcoming Richa Goyal Sikri.
Good morning. You know, one of the things I love about this is my first time in Tucson. And thank you for that lovely introduction and a big thank you to AGTA for inviting me to speak. It's an organization that I have admired and respected for a long time, and I'm delighted to be here. Now, someone asked me earlier whether I had some books to give away or sell in Tucson. Unfortunately, I don't, but I have a hack. So the book is available on almost all international, global, sort of online retail platforms. In the US, it's available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. So and this is what it looks like. I have one copy here, which has already been committed and spoken for. So I think it's for like $23 on Barnes & Noble when I checked in the morning. And if you order it online, I have this lovely personal card that I'm carrying from Singapore. I can write a little note for you, and you can go home when your book arrives, stick it in there, and take a photograph, post it on Instagram, tag me. I will repost your post with a grateful message. So we cross-pollinate our followers and hopefully get some traction besides the book. Buy the book if you're going to read it. Don't just put it on a shelf. And so without further ado, we have like 55 minutes. So this is going to be a little bit like a speed dating session. And I'm going to get started. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I do a whole bunch of things in the industry. This is not what I was supposed to be doing at this stage in my life. I turned 50 a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually supposed to be the CEO of our family company in the travel and tourism sector. Thank God my parents had a second child who is now the CEO of the company. And the reason I am not doing that is because I got infected by the gem fever when I first visited a mine in Sri Lanka in 2014. And I think one of the most difficult things in life is self-realization. And it took me a while between 2014 and 2017, I was traveling to mines and manufacturing centers and just like getting deeper and deeper into this addiction, obsession, whatever you want to call it. And then one of my friends who was fed up of listening to me talking about stones suggested I open an Instagram account. And he was like, listen, why don't you do this and go find your people so that you can stop boring us over dinner? And I said, okay, fine. And it was supposed to be an online scrapbook. So in many respects, I'm an Instagram poster child, because once I started doing these posts, editors of different magazines and publications found me and asked me to start writing for them. And so I've been a journalist since 2017. I recently got off my lazy couch and put together a profile website. And so a lot of my articles are on the website in case you want to go and read some of them. So let's get enough about me. Let's focus on the book and on the crazy adventurers who are in this book. And I want to talk a little bit about why this book was first commissioned. It was commissioned by Gemfields, and for those of you who don't know who that is, they own the world's largest emerald mine in Zambia and the world's largest ruby mine in Mozambique. And this book was commissioned around May 2020. And the reason was because at that time we were all stuck in this global pandemic. And we were getting news about senior people in the industry who we were losing to COVID. Now, industry sources estimate that maybe around 70 to 80% of colored stones that are being mined and cut and polished today are coming from the African continent. And while the deposits, the African deposits, have been well documented in GIA articles and other GEMA articles and in magazines, the human stories behind those deposits, behind the discovery of those deposits, behind the development of those deposits and related activities, those human stories have never been told. And this book was commissioned with this humbling realization that if these stories are not documented, as a generation, we will lose them forever in a couple of decades. And the circumstances, of course, on planet Earth were very different at that time. So when Gemfields commissioned this book, they gave me a blank piece of paper, but they had two conditions. They said only Africa and no diamonds. And other than that, you're free to go and feature whoever you deem appropriate, and bye-bye, and we will see you in 1 year. So the original deadline was March 2021. And then, of course, 1 year became 2, 2 became 3. And the reason was because if I wanted to, I could have finished this book in a year. All I had to do was go to a trade show or a couple of trade shows and interview a bunch of gem merchants who had either traveled to Africa or had dealings with Africa, and I would have enough stories. There are like a whole bunch of books right now on the floor at the Gem Fair here. But I wanted the book to be well representative and each story to be authentic. So there are stories of international people who have had a massive impact on the African colored gemstone industry, but there are also stories about people who you would have never heard of, people who are still living in Madagascar, who are native to the land, and who you will probably not know or meet at events like these because they are hidden figures. So that took time to find these authentic stories. The other reason it took time was because the primary research was interviewing the contributors. And sometimes, the interview would be like, okay, tell me your life story and we'll find something for the book. So it would be sometimes 6, 7 phone calls, each one being like an hour or 2 hour long, which I would then transcribe and then be like, okay, what elements from their life experiences can be made a short story with some fictional bits thrown in by me. So that took time. And then to do the secondary research to verify some of the things, because human memories are funny. Someone would give me a year and then I would do some research and go back to them and say, oh, but you said 2000 and it couldn't be 2000, it must have been 98 because, yeah, you're right, it was 98. So that took time. And one of the other challenges was, I was introduced to this Malagasy cutter who lives in Antananarivo, and he didn't speak a word of English. So he would send me his stories in Malagasy on email. I would translate those emails, absorb what he had written, write a reply back in English, get that translated, and then email him back. And that went on for like 6 months till I had the story that I thought could go in the book. But of course, that's what also makes life fun. So let's get started. Now, colored gemstones in Africa have been extracted since the time of the pharaohs. We know this. But if we take this period of antiquity and we just park it aside for a moment, and we focus on the contemporary period, then colored gemstones were discovered roughly, in my view, in 3 waves. And the first wave happened during the colonization of Africa, or the scramble for Africa. And around this time, you had gemologists, you had miners, you had people from these colonial powers who came to Africa to search for mineral deposits. And gemstones were a nice, light, coincidental finds. And then after these countries started getting independence, they started either using those colonial maps and finding these deposits, establishing mines, or taking over mining operations or licenses and building on top of that. So this book contains stories from the period of independent Africa. It does not have any stories about any kings and queens from the colonial period or even earlier. It's primarily starting in the 60s, because most of these deposits have been found in the last 15 to 60 years. But before I go to Africa, I have to take you to a little town called Idar Oberstein. And as many of you may know, that this little place, this picturesque place, for I think 400 years was the center of cutting and polishing and mining of colored gemstones. And when it became too difficult to mine the stones in Idar, this community, this small community, started traveling internationally in search of rough colored stones. They went to Brazil, and then they came to Africa, which brings me to the first story in the book. The stories have been arranged chronologically. It's set in Madagascar in 1968, and it features this tall gentleman that you see in this first photograph. Now, these photographs are not in the book. The book does have photographs. They're black and white photographs, not color photographs. It was a conscious decision because there was a big debate about whether we should do a color, like a coffee table book, or should we do a paperback? Should we do color photos? Should we do black and white photos? And we went with black and white because I wanted to keep the price accessible. And I didn't want the book to be expensive. So time will tell whether that was a good idea or not. But the gentleman you see, the tall guy there in the white shirt, his name is Julius Pesch. And he arrives in Madagascar in 1968. And he is from Idar, and he's looking for stones. He's a buyer. And there's something happening in Madagascar because of which he can't find a hotel room. So he is sleeping on a couch in a library and can't sleep, jet-lagged, so he starts rummaging around. It's a library in the home of a professor who also sells colored stones. So he's rummaging around trying to find a book to read, and he stumbles across this book, and he's flipping through it, and he sees these incredible photographs. And he's looking at the caption, and it says tourmaline. And he has never seen tourmalines like this ever in his life. So he turns a couple of pages and he finds a map. But he has no idea where this deposit is. So the next morning, he goes to the gem dealer whose home he was staying in, and he says, "Have you seen this deposit and these stones?" And turns out that the guy, I think it was Alfred Lacroix, who wrote, a very eminent French gemologist who wrote that book. Turns out that the gem dealer's wife was Lacroix's daughter. But then the story starts becoming a treasure hunt. And this grumpy-looking guy in the hat in the corner, it becomes this, like the holy grail that they start searching for, because he used to work for her father and is the only guy who knows where the mine exists. And so they start looking for him, and they find him, and to convince him to help them, it all boils down to a barrel of red wine. So to learn more about what eventually happens and how it happens, you have to read the book. I have the interesting task of telling you about the stories in the book without actually telling you the whole story. But these photographs also show you, these are real photographs because Mr. Pesh is also a photographer. And when this book was published in 2024, I'd never met him because, it was the pandemic. So I wanted to present him the first copy of the book. So I traveled to Idar from Singapore and met him and took this little interview. So he's 88. And so without further ado, I'm going to play this little video. So if the audio is on at the back, okay, over to you, Mr. Pesh.
So it's already a long time back. In 1965, I knew Madagascar, it's somewhere in the world, and I discovered an old letter from an old uncle of mine who described Madagascar and the wealth of gemstones. Here in the industry, very few people knew, nobody went there. And then I took the decision, I go and see Madagascar when I was 26 years old. And by coincidence, I met some dealers who were happy to have a buyer because there was no buyer at that time. And I could buy. And then I saw also in their little stocks, I saw very nice aquamarine, tourmaline, some rubies and things like that. And then I came to my idea, I have to stay here sometime and I have to rediscover these old mines, which I really did. And I was very successful. My biggest success was, of course, the rediscovering of the famous mine, the tourmaline, which they today called liquidotite. And I had discovered also a big, with my help of my Malgache friend, a big aquamarine mine, where once we found a pocket with 28 aquamarine crystals, cuttable, 3,000 kilo.
Oh my God.
And then Madagascar was for me like a paradise until the moment came, the government changed and they didn't want to have us anymore here, and that was the end of the story. But we continued, and I'm happy to have been born in this gemstone business, which took over all my life, and my son also is now in the gemstone business, and we have more than 123 years tradition.
No, thank you so much.
So you cut out what is not nice.
No, it's fine.
Wait.
Sorry, love.
No, it's fine.
Send me some, do you make some?
That, ladies and gentlemen, is a lidicotite tourmaline from Madagascar. And GIA has a very interesting habit. I love GIA, but this is the one point on which we have a problem, is that they name new discoveries. Of course, this one is named after the legend Richard Lidicotite, Richard Lidicote. And but to a layperson who is a newbie in the industry, they may think that Mr. Lidicote actually discovered this gemstone. It was rediscovered by Julius Pesh in 1968. And of course, he also went on to do wonderful things. He was the CEO of the Sandawana Emerald Mine. He was an advisor to the Zambian government and a whole bunch of other contributions, including being president of the International Colored Stone Association. Right, a fun story in the book is called Scorpions and Raiders. It's set in Kenya around the early 80s, and it features that young boy sitting over there. And of course, he's not a young boy today, but when I first contacted Naushad, he's like, listen, we're not big people. We haven't done any big discoveries. We're not fancy. We don't have any stories for your book. Like, are you sure you want us in this book? And I said, no, just tell me some stories. And I have not laughed as much as I did during that conversation because he told me stories which were unbelievable. So this story follows Naushad when he was 10 or 12 years old and visiting his father's aquamarine mine in a very remote part of Kenya, and all the shenanigans that he gets up to and all the adventures that happen over a 24-hour period. So one of those adventures was his father getting stung by a scorpion, and one of their key team members suggesting that they hook up, because they were in such a remote part, they had a little first aid kit, no doctors nearby. So they came up with this brilliant idea, the mine workers, that why don't we hook up the boss to the battery of the Land Rover and electrocute him to get rid of the scorpion sting. And what they finally did or did not do, you'll have to read the story to find out. But true story. I couldn't believe it. The father is still alive. And the thing is that, people ask me that you didn't come from this industry, and yet you've sort of made good friends and become a part of this industry, and how did you do it? And I always tell people the same thing. I said, when you meet people in the colored gemstone industry, you connect with them instantly because it's an addiction, and they recognize the malaise in your eyes and you recognize it in theirs, and that's how the bonds happen and how conversations start flowing. One of those addicts is Chris Johnston, who's this crazy, kooky guy who lives in Namibia. He's an American who went to Namibia in the 90s and just never came back. And he still lives there. And he has, with his own bare hands, built the Green Dragon mine, which is responsible for some incredible dementoid garnets from Namibia. He is responsible for discovering the Nuishwaben lagoon tourmaline deposit in Namibia. And lagoon tourmalines from Namibia are famous. So this is one of those figures that if you know, but most people don't know. And so here's a short video of him talking about one of his stories.
Hi there. Greetings from Namibia. So it was 1991, and Peter Schnurla stopped by my room at the Pueblo Inn and pulled a rock out of his pocket. That was the most incredible orange, pure orange, the orange analog of kryptonite that I'd ever seen. And he asked me what I thought of it. And I said, well, I don't know where somebody got a red cloud wolfenite that big to cut, but that's unbelievable. And he looked at me and he said, Chris, it's a garnet. And I was stunned, frankly. 3 years fast forward, I'm in Namibia, traveling around with Charlie Key, and there was a partnership divorce fallout brouhaha between the owners of the original Spessartine mine, which was at the river, and the new mine, which was 30 kilometers down the Marienfloss Valley. And the owner of the Marienfloss deposit, the new mine, had hit a pocket and was trying to export 28 kilos of rough at 25 US cents a gram. And the Ministry of Mines and Energy and Namibian Customs stopped the load. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to put a value on it, but they didn't think 25 cents was fair. So then acting mining commissioner Alan Walden got a hold of Charlie and I and asked us if we'd value the parcel. And an appointment was set up, and we were in an office, and they brought it in, and they put Charlie in one room, they put me in another, and we proceeded to value the parcel. And the first bag that I got was 5 kilos of 10-gram pieces, clean. And to this day, I can bring up a picture of it in my mind, and it was staggering. So we spent the next 5 hours looking basically at every piece in 28 kilos. And Charlie came up with a number, and I came up with a number. They were both far north of 200,000 US dollars, and this is in 1993. And that was the end of it. Customs seized it, and eventually the owner got it back after paying a big fine. And Charlie and I sort of have spent the rest of our days, Charlie's gone now, but we spent the rest of our days remembering that 28 kilo bag of spessartine rough. I mean, the stuff is just ridiculous. I don't care where it's from, Nigeria, Tanzania, Southern California, Virginia. Nothing comes close to the new mine spessartine that came out in 1993. And that's my story. Hope you enjoyed it.
So ever since I heard that story, I've been looking. The river that he's talking about is the Kunene River, which divides Angola and Namibia. And I've been looking for those garnets, asking everyone if anyone has any Kunene garnets from Namibia. I haven't found any. But two things I'll tell you about Chris. One is that when he was, a miner, now you can find him on Instagram. He's got this very original Instagram account, which is Namibian Minerals for Sale, or something like that. So he sells mineral specimens, and when he would find a rough stone, he would eat it. He would put it in his mouth, swirl it around, taste it, and spit it out to check the stones. That was his MO. And he almost lost that entire mine and that deposit over 5 chickens. Stories in the book. Now, this is a man who really needs no introduction. I'm sure a lot of you recognize that photograph and recognize the gentleman, Campbell Bridges, who is regarded by the industry as the father of Savarite. And the story follows him in Kenya and shares stories that have never been told. And I was blessed to have the help of his family, Bruce Bridges, who's also the president of AGTA now, to help with the story. And I'll tell you a story that Bruce told me, which is not in the book, of how Savarite was named. Maybe a lot of you already know this story. So when the first nice parcel came out, Campbell Bridges took it to Henry B. Platt of Tiffany & Co. And Henry looked at the stones and he said, listen, I love them, they are fantastic, but I can't sell them. And he said, why? He said, because no one is going to buy a stone which is called grossular green garnet. It's a name that's not going to sell. So we need a stage name. And since you found it, and interesting story, I'll come back to it, let me finish this one. He said, since you found it, you named the stone. So his wife, Judy, said, why don't we call it Campbellite, after your name? And he said, no, that sounds a little weird. He said, why don't we call it Savarite? Because Kenya is our home. And so he named it after the Tsavo National Park. And again, most people think that Campbell Bridges first discovered Savarite in Tanzania in 1967, but he first stumbled across Savarite in Zimbabwe in 1961. It was not called Zimbabwe at that time, but he wasn't able to do anything about it. So he found it in Zimbabwe, then Tanzania, and then Kenya. So truly, it was his destiny, and the gem gods had him. He was the chosen one for this stone. Now, one story which I was told I must put in the book and I was told I must not put in the book is this one, New Heat. It's the only story in the book which is not set in Africa. And it features AGTA. It's about, and when I was telling someone about the story, I said it's on the Beryllium diffusion scandal. And the person turned around and said, which one? And I was like, oh, okay. So this is on Now, if you don't know what the beryllium diffusion scandal of 2001 is, let me give you a quick snapshot. In 2001, sapphires from Madagascar were being heated in a furnace with the presence of chrysoberyl, and that presence of chrysoberyl was changing the color of the stones to this elusive patparacha pinkish orange color. Now, that treatment was being sold in the market under the title of new heat. And the fact that chrysoberyl was present was not being disclosed, and because of the presence of chrysoberyl, there was a diffusion of beryllium in the lattice, and it was not being disclosed. And so the opening scene is at the AGTA Gem Lab in New York. And the director of the lab at that time was a gentleman called Ken Scarrett. So Ken is sitting and congratulating himself on having cleared most of his emails, and he's, wants to just get back in the lab. And an email pops up in his inbox, and he's reading this email, and he can't believe the words that he's reading. So, because Ken is the one who one of the first people who discovered that there was something funny going on with these incredible Patparacha sapphires that were hitting the market. So he calls up his friend Tom Moses, who's working at GIA, and he's like, Tom, I've got a really strange email. And he's like, what does the email say? He said, the email says that next time we're in Bangkok, a motorcycle assassin is going to put a bullet in our head because we are just ruining the industry and we've spoiled everything with this declaration and this warning that we have sent out against these Patparacha sapphires. So I was just wondering, are we still on for the trip to Bangkok next week? And so both these gentlemen basically were at the center of the discovery of this treatment, at then putting together resources to do further scientific experiment and research. Because of this treatment and the discovery and yes, it was a scandal, the scandal that followed, which led to all trading of sapphires being stopped at one point. And because of that, the Gem Lab, the whole laser ablation ICP was introduced in Gem Labs because of this. So it was a pivotal moment in colored gemstone history, and it led to an enormous change in the way Gem Labs today identify treatments. And again, where do you go to find now this article of Bangkok Post that you see here? Some of these documents I've published in the book. If you go on the Bangkok Post website and you look under archives, you won't find this article. Because I interviewed, I think, 11 or 12, there are 11 contributors to this story from all over the world. And one of them was like, you need to go and get in touch with Jeff Bilgore because he's trained as a lawyer, and I think he might have something for you. So I called Jeff, and he's like, I have every scrap of paper that ever was published or that ever came out related to the scandal. I've got 3 cartons in my garage. I'm going to get them for you. And so, that took time to get all this information together. And how do you take the complicated science behind beryllium diffusion and condense it and distill it into 3 sentences so that someone who doesn't even know that an emerald is green will be able to understand what I'm talking about in the story? So that is new heat for you. And basically what you will get from it is all the behind the scenes that was going on with all these individuals that has never been documented before. Right. Now we come to a guy known as Mr. 10%. And I'm delighted to share with you that we have him in the room today, sitting right front and center in the front row, Mr. Tony Brooks. You can wave at everyone here. So if anyone orders that book, this book on Barnes & Noble on Amazon, and you get me to sign that little card for you, make sure you get him to sign a little piece of paper and you stick it on the story in his section of the book. And this story is a wonderful, charming, and when you'll meet him, the story is like him, very charming, full of humor, and a delightful story, which shows you the invisible power of the gem merchants and the brokers who are working behind the scenes to make things happen. And it opens with Tony sitting in his office, and a guy called Brad walks into his office in Bangkok at the Jewelry Trade Center, and he brings, I think, 5 kilos of Songya rough sapphires from his mine, which he's unable to sell because this is happening in 2003, just after the beryllium diffusion scandal has hit the market. So he brings this parcel to Tony, and Tony's like, I know the guy who I can take this to, who will buy these from you. And he takes him to a guy, we will call him KJ. Name has been changed. And he takes him to this guy, and while they're on their way, Brad is asking him, so who is this guy? He's like, listen, he's a problem fixer, okay? Anything that can't be sold by anyone, you just bring it to this guy, he will buy it. He will distribute these stones to cutting factories all over Thailand, but you can't mess with him. Okay, you have to be very straight with him. And as Tony is saying this to Brad, they're walking into KJ's office, and Brad is looking around and looking at the armed security guards and everything, and the elevator door opens, and Brad's like, I don't know if this is such a good idea, and they walk into the elevator. So the story follows the mining operation in Tanzania, goes to Bangkok, Chantaburi, and it really sort of gives you an insider view on how deals are done for rough and how they're treated, and some of the challenges and some of the triumphs. So thank you for being here, Tony. Paraiba-like. Now, I was concerned about time, so there was another slide which I deleted from this presentation, where I usually tell a historic story about diamonds. I will try and say it in 30 seconds. For 2,000 years, diamonds were, India was the only source of diamonds. They were found in the early 1700s in Brazil. And when they were found in Brazil, these Brazilian diamonds started coming to the European markets. So the European diamond merchants who were sitting on inventory of Indian diamonds that they had paid a pretty penny for were really upset because they're like, the value of our inventory is going to go down. So they spread a rumor that these Brazilian diamonds are all inferior and only the Indian diamonds are the really beautiful diamonds that you must have. So the Portuguese, who were the colonial masters of Brazil at that time, and who also were the colonial masters of the global hub for precious stone trading, which was Goa in India, said, we're not happy about this rumor. So they said, okay, no problem. They took the Brazilian diamonds from Brazil, shipped them over to Goa, and sold the same Brazilian diamonds to the European merchants as Indian diamonds. And the reason why I share this diamond story is because that's what has been happening with the best that came out of Africa. Especially these fabulous tourmalines, which are Paraiba tourmalines, officially known now as Paraiba tourmalines from Mozambique. The best of the best were never sold as originating from Mozambique. And it's the story of this guy, Musa Konate, who makes it his life's mission to really sell these stones as Mozambique tourmalines. And he's one of the earliest people who was there in Mozambique when these stones were coming out and who looked at them and thought, hey, maybe these can be heated and turned into Paraiba tourmalines. And the guy with him is KK, who is his partner, a Brazilian partner in this venture. When I made this presentation at the GEME conference, which was in November of 2024, 2 weeks before my presentation, Musa Konate's Paraiba tourmaline mine was attacked. And there was news coverage that happened in Mozambique at that time. I'm sharing with you a clip that you won't find online of that attack and the news coverage of that attack. And that was in November of 2024. In Feb and March of 2025, the other operations, the other mining operations, Miranda Group and a bunch of others, had a similar thing happen to them. And as I stand here today, the institutional or the mechanized mining operation for Paraiba tourmalines has been set back by these attacks by at least 30 years. So just a small snippet, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but just to give you a sense of what, what is the reality of these things on the ground.
Boa tarde, obrigada, Julieta Zocula. Seguimos até Nampula, onde 300 quilos de turmalinas foram roubados numa mineradora localizada no posto administrativo de Xalaua, na província de Nampula. Ricardo Machava e Ivo Oliveira trazem-nos mais detalhes.
A imagem é de total destruição. Estamos na localidade de Mavuco, posto administrativo de Xalaua, distrito de Moma, província de Nampula. É assim como ficou a Moçambique Gems Limitada. Trata-se de uma mineradora que está aqui desde 2011 e dedica-se à extração e processamento primário de turmalinas. Turmalinas são pedras preciosas de grande valor no mercado internacional. Depois da invasão na vila-sede do posto administrativo de Xalaua, no domingo, ontem, segunda-feira, um grupo numeroso, até aqui diz-se que são garimpeiros ilegais, veio a esta mina e praticou um ato de vandalismo. Um vandalismo total. Aqui estamos na parte onde a mineradora faz a extração e o processamento. E a imagem é praticamente desoladora. São máquinas pesadas que foram incendiadas e outro equipamento usado na mineração.
A nossa base é aqui, porque é onde tem a nossa planta de processamento, onde nós conservamos todos os nossos equipamentos e, conforme estão a ver, também aqui temos o minério que estava sendo processado nesses dias. Então, praticamente, o coração da empresa é aqui.
E que grau de destruição aqui?
Aqui eu não posso saber fazer um cálculo estimado, mas sei que é muito investimento que foi embora.
Okay, so that gives you a sense of it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. Right. Moving on to I shouldn't say favorite, because you can't have a favorite when it comes to colored gemstones. But most people think that, and I thought when I first entered this industry, that the story of Zambian emeralds started with gem fields. And I later discovered that this deposit in the Kafubu Emerald Fields in Zambia actually has such a rich history that, again, has never been documented. So the deposit was first, the exploration started in 1928. Then in the 40s and 50s, there was exploration work that continued, and the first mining license for emerald mining was actually registered by Rio Tinto in 1963. And in 64, Zambia got its independence, and it was around that time that the government established the first mine, which was the Miko mine next to the Miko River in the Kafubu Emerald Fields. But they lost control of this deposit because this deposit is located near the border with the DRC now. At that time, it was, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they lost complete control over this deposit and were looking for someone to establish a proper mine. Enter a gentleman who I interviewed in 2020 when he was 95 years old. His name was Shiv Shankar Gupta, and this was someone whose name had been whispered to me on a number of occasions. It took me, I think, 3-4 months to find him, another month to get his number and get him on the phone. And this was a gentleman who was from Jaipur and who was in Colombia in the 50s buying rough emeralds. He established an operation in Brazil in the 60s. And in the 60s, he was the owner of the world's largest emerald mine in South Africa, which is the Gravelot Emerald Mine. But if you take the word Gravelot and you say it in Jaipur, nobody will know what you're talking about, because they call it the Cobra Mine. And this photograph that I got from his family is from 1978, and it shows one of the belts where they're processing rough emeralds from Gravelot. What was interesting about the Gravelot deposit is that it was like a chocolate cake. So a lot of quantity, quality very minimal. It was just really large volume. So and it was hard rock, so you were just like slicing the cake and serving it. But the Jaipur industry was not, the cutting and polishing industry that we know today in Jaipur did not exist. It was like 10 families who were cutting and polishing emeralds. So Shiv Shankar Gupta needed to create an industry who would absorb all the rough that he was bringing from South Africa. And now he passed away in March 2021, but I'm sharing with you a voice note from my interview with him, so that you have a sense of his voice and you hear a little bit about his history in his own words.
If I tell you I have produced tons and tons of material, I didn't know where it goes, how it can be consumed, and for being consumed. Talking of not kilos, carats, and grams, I am talking of tons.
And so he is, in many respects, the father of the emerald industry in Jaipur today. He would give people jute bags of rough emerald on credit. And people who were not part of that industry, people who were selling newspapers or selling sweet shop, and these were people that he brought into the industry saying, just take it and cut it and figure it out. He imported machines from Israel and from different parts of the world to Jaipur, and gave these away to people so that an industry could be built. I mean, one would say that, yeah, he did it for his own selfish reasons, but the impact is still what it is today. So here's another clip in which he talks about how he established the Kajam Emerald Mine, which eventually was purchased by Gemfields. And it was a company called Hagura. And there were 3 people, but I will stop talking and play the next video clip so you can hear the story from him.
We were 3 people there. I was the first. Then I took the Israeli, that is Benjamin, and the third was Raw. Now 2 of them are no more. I'm the only one who is living.
Yes.
So the story of Kajam is very deep, because it was very productive in the very beginning. We were finding the stones on surface, not digging much. At the time when I discovered emerald and I got emerald, in Jaipur there were 20 traders and about 200 cutters.
That's it.
They didn't, that's it. They didn't know how to cut emeralds properly. It was very, very old style, which was used at 1800. And I innovated, I brought machines, I taught people. And in 5 years, 7 years, the gemstone industry rose to 700,000 people.
So there are 3 books, there are 3 stories on the Kajam Emerald Mine in the book. And one is around Shiv Shankar Gupta. 2 of them actually around him and his family. And the third one is after the first year after Gemfields takes over. And a disastrous emerald auction that is not even on their website and that nobody talks about. But it's in the book. Now, Mozambique today is the world's #1 ruby deposit. Most people think that rubies were discovered in Mozambique in 2009, but there was an earlier discovery in the Niassa Reserve in 2008. I'm sharing this photograph here because I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Mozambique. And this is something that I'm talking about because we focus on the contemporary history and, you know, without realizing what those nations and those people have experienced. So Mozambique got its independence from Portugal after nearly 500 years of colonial rule, which means that if I was a young woman or man in 1970 living in Mozambique, the only thing my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather knew was Portuguese colonial rule. And then this country was plunged into civil war. So our story begins in the mid-90s when a guy from Spain is trying to establish a fishing business in a remote part of northern Mozambique. And it follows the journey of this company, which had nothing to do with gemstones. They didn't want to have anything to do with gemstones. When they were first told about rubies on their estate, their first reaction was, that's a business for smugglers. We don't want to have anything to do with it. And so this is the origin story. There are 2 origin stories related to rubies in Mozambique. The first one is from 2008. It's about a female Tanzanian gem dealer called Mama Roni. And it's titled Mama Roni Goes to Mozambique. And the second one is on the Montepuez ruby deposit, which I have very cheekily called Ruby Land, because if you go to Myanmar and go to Mogok, there'll be a big sign there saying, "Welcome to Ruby Land." So, but I welcome you to discover the stories. And the thing with the stories in this book, and another reason why I wanted to really write this book was because when you talk about Africa content, it's either Blood Diamond, National Geographic, or Disney. And the reality is maybe a little bit of all 3, but it is so much more than just those 3 buckets. So the attempt in this book is not, I describe it as Indiana Jones meets P.G. Wodehouse, because it's full of laughter. Every story has got a big dollop of humor. And not because that was the plan or there was a formula, because that's how life is. And it's natural. And so I hope you enjoy it. We're almost at the end now. Oh, we are at the end. So as I said before, book is available online. And shameless plug, feel free to find me on Instagram and follow my account. Send me a message, say hi, and I will follow you back. And we will go somewhere over the rainbow. And thank you very much again for this opportunity. And don't be shy to ask any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Richa? No questions? Not even to find out the answer to some of these stories?
I think everyone's hungry for lunch.
I think so. Oh.
No worries. You can always message me later if you have a question.
All right.
Thank you so
Richa,
much.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.